Welcome in. Time for another college football playoff preview. That's a good thing as we wind it on down, but not without pertinent information from our guests at the best sites in all the land. Team sites for On3. Anthony Broome, our next guest, with the Wolverine. Obviously, Michigan in a place to play for. Anthony, a chance to play in the national championship game if they can get this victory. You know, it's funny. First of all, welcome in. Thanks for making the time as always, and Merry Christmas. But I would also say to you that, as the season pressed on, we talked a lot during the year, and I would always end our conversations with, I'm sure I'll talk to you down the line. And the reason for that was obvious. Michigan was winning games, and they were going to be playing more important games, and we would have you back on. Well, here we go, man. There's not much left. We've learned a lot about this team. Start wherever you want to start. I think I'd be inclined to start with J.J. McCarthy because the first time we talked, it was after the Maryland game, and he was just okay. As to be expected with a young guy, he's a lot better than okay now.
Yeah, at some point, the reason they made that switch from Cade McNamara to J.J. McCarthy is that the gut feeling was that when you needed someone who could do a little bit more when things got thrown off script. And as we saw, it was a season-long build up to that where, McCarthy sort of learned on the job, and the way that Michigan controls the line of scrimmage and runs the football allowed him to do that. And then all of a sudden, you get thrown a curveball where Blake Corum gets hurt against Illinois, and you go to that Ohio State game and you need your quarterback to go out and win you a football game. And when push came to shove and they needed him to, use everything that he had learned throughout the year and hit on some of those deep balls and make big plays with his legs, he came up in every single big moment for them. And it was it justified the decision, but also, it just proved that to get to that next level of competing for more than Big Ten championships, competing for national championships, your quarterback has to be a star. And I know the accuracy has slipped a bit compared to earlier in this year, but J.J. McCarthy's been a star for them, and he hasn't made the big mistake that has hurt them in these football games like maybe he may have been a little more prone to early in the year. So, the heart and soul of that offense for the first 11, 12 weeks of the season was Blake Corum. But now it's undisputed leader, and the guy that this national title run potentially hinges on is J.J. McCarthy at quarterback. At this point in the year, you're not a sophomore anymore. You're closer to being a junior going into your third year into a system than you are, the guy who is green and fresh and hadn't had much experience in a starting capacity coming into this season. He is, to me, by far the biggest player, the player that will have the biggest impact on Michigan's, certainly its Fiesta Bowl game Saturday and its game potentially 10 days after that in LA.
I know you guys wrote about it for the Wolverine. I know the site did a good job of covering that aspect, the growth of J.J. McCarthy and what now that's changed his life. I mean, let's be honest. You go to Ohio State and you win that game on the road with such an impressive manner. I think it was 3 touchdowns, 260-plus throwing, was just every big play that had to be made in that game he made. That changes fortunes. That changes your lot in life. Like, he can never undo that in a good way. There's a lore that is already established for him. Now, how has he handled it?
He is cut from a different cloth. He's a guy that, anytime you're a 5-star or a fringe 5-star quarterback coming out of high school, some of those guys, there's I don't want to say, maybe entitlement isn't the right way to put it, but McCarthy has a grit to him. Like, he's a former hockey player, so he's got a toughness to him. He's got there's a bit of an edge to him, but he's extremely poised. He's confident. He is supportive. You never see the deer in the headlight look in his eyes. I mean, and he's very good at, if he makes a mistake, putting that in a box and putting it where it belongs, and it doesn't affect his play the rest of the way. So, and the thing about him is that something that gets overlooked with his play is that he missed all of spring football with a shoulder injury. So he really didn't even get into that quarterback competition truly until fall camp. And, you missed a lot of development time. He missed a lot of mechanical work. I think certainly, you don't want to look too far ahead past this season, but, for him, the best is still yet to come. I think his footwork, his ball placement are things that will be an emphasis for him, even in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But this is a guy who the scariest thing about him and for this Michigan offense is that I don't think he's played his best 4-quarter football game yet. And this is that biggest stage now with the lights are the brightest. And to me, when the pressure's been the most on him this year, that's when he's played his best football. So I expect that in this Fiesta Bowl on Saturday. And if they make it past that, I will expect it on that stage as well.
It's interesting, too, very different set of circumstances. I know plenty of articles written nationally about Michigan using last year's loss as motivation for this game, but a very different situation. This time around, Michigan is a big-time favorite in this game. I think if you poll the nation of college football-loving fans, most all of us would take Michigan to win this game based on something as simple as maybe the eye test, which is not a great way of deciding who's going to win a football game, but people do, certainly, as fans. And they would look at these two teams and they would say, well, I really think the difference is going to be the Michigan defense versus the TCU offense, and that TCU has not seen a defense like Michigan's. We'll get to that in a moment. But how has this offense changed? Does Michigan want to win this game with the traditional Harbaugh style of running the football, or now that they have a bona fide star at quarterback who's brimming with confidence and certainly proved on the biggest of stages, because it doesn't get bigger than Michigan-Ohio State, that he can be trusted to make big throws? How do they want to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, you lose Blake Corum, and you certainly have to adjust to that. But Michigan's not going to become the air raid, right? Like they are still they want to win at the line of scrimmage. And the nice thing for them is that they have a guy who, coming into this year, we thought that it would be a 1A and 1B situation with Corum and Donovan Edwards. And Donovan Edwards kind of took the baton from Corum and, had the big performance against Ohio State, had another big game in the Big Ten championship game. And that's a guy where, he's going to be leaned on a bit, and they'll piece it together with some other guys. But, they're going to get – TCU's going to get a steady dose of Donovan Edwards. And at the same time, there's a confidence now that, the Michigan will say that there weren't shackles on McCarthy earlier in the year. It feels like they were. You go and look back at some of those games. But now there's a confidence that you can put a little more on his plate. And when you need him to go out and make a throw or make a play, if it's not with his arms and things break down, he can get on his high horse and do it with his legs. So, the thing with Michigan is that it all boils down to what they're able to do up front on the offensive line. When you can control the trenches like they do on offense, you get to dictate the terms of what a football game looks like. So I think that you'll probably see TCU load the box a bit and play that physical press coverage and make Michigan's wide receivers try and beat them at the line of scrimmage, which has been something that honestly they've struggled with a bit at times this year. But I think there's a confidence now that, last year Georgia was able to take the run game away from Michigan, and that, everything just kind of toppled like a house of cards after that. Now there's a confidence that, even, Ohio State for the most part took the run away from Michigan, took the run away from them in that game. And Michigan was able to just keep fighting, and the defense, made the stops it needed to make. And all of a sudden, you just stick to it and you've got yourself a win. So I think that will probably be the recipe.
That was the graduation, right? That was it. That you just nailed the point, because everybody knew you've got to stop Michigan from running the ball, play press man against their receivers and say, I don't think you're fast enough to beat me. You're physical guys, but I don't think you're going to run past me. And then boom, Ohio State tried to do all of that, and Michigan decided, oh, no, we've got that in our back pocket as well. I don't think TCU can win the game any other way but to come up and try to stop the run, because this is going to be a long day at the office, I think, for TCU's offense. So I think you got to try to make this kind of a slugfest, and I wonder if that happens. How do you see it on the other side of the ball, since we haven't touched on that side of it yet with Michigan? Look, Michigan's got, 8 to 10 pros on this roster, depending on what you look at with the NFL projections. I think 9 certainly is a good number to look at there. Maybe not in total on defense, just in total on the team. But a lot of that resides on the defensive side of the ball. So I am curious, do you see TCU as a gritty team, tough team, gritty quarterback, certainly? How do you see that offense faring against this Michigan defense?
Yeah, there is a grit to them. I think that Michigan – Michigan hasn't really seen a running quarterback with the ability to run like Max Duggan does since maybe playing Maryland all the way back in week 4. It's been that long this season. So it's a different look for them. I think defensively for them, the recipe will probably continue to look the way it has, where, you might get popped for a few big plays in the first half, but you get off the field enough and you get to the locker room and make your adjustments. And that's when you really start to kind of crank up the intensity and ratchet stuff down and get a little more pressure. To me, the biggest storyline is Max Duggan. If you get into the scenarios where you force them into a 3rd and 9 or a 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13, and then you've got everything covered down the field, but then Max Duggan kind of gets out on you and picks up 14 yards when they needed 13. Those are backbreakers and those are game changers. And I think you look back at the Big 12 championship game, and Max Duggan was the driving force behind that. And he's got it's a comparison I've made a few times. It's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but watching that game again, as we've watched it a couple times, he's got a little bit of a Tebow-esque flair to his game when it comes to willing his team to victory. So that's, to me, I think the biggest thing. Quentin Johnston is going to be a lot to handle. Anytime you have a 6'4" receiver that runs in the 4.3s or the 4.4s, that's a unicorn. And Michigan has some guys with length, but you're going to give up big plays. So for them, it's just staying within it. You want to get that pass rush going. The nice thing for Michigan is they can kind of roll those guys in and out, similar to like a hockey line. It's the second time I've used a hockey reference here, but I think that Michigan will be okay. I think the recipe for them will look like a lot of these games where it's close in the first half, and then Michigan's, kind of cranks it up on the offensive and defensive lines late and is able to find a way to pull away.
It's okay. We love hockey. It's all right. You can talk hockey all you want. I'm fine with it. By the way, Anthony, before we let you go, I am curious from the Michigan standpoint. You want Ohio State? You want that rematch?
That's a good question. I mean, there's certainly the first thing that people talk about is, oh, well, what does that mean for Jim Harbaugh in Michigan? I'd argue, what would it mean for Ryan Day and Ohio State
Correct.
to lose that game again? I think that if we're sitting here objectively asking, who would you rather see in a national championship game? I think it is Ohio State, because what they are. You know what they are, and you're you're the boogeyman now all of a sudden. Georgia would be interesting just because, at the very least, I wouldn't pick them to win that game, but you get to gauge just how much further along they are compared to Georgia as compared to last year's game. But honestly, you get to that last Monday night, you just want to win it. You want to win the whole darn thing. And if you don't, it's going to be disappointing. So it's tough. I think the Michigan fan base is fairly split on it. But, the way I see it, I would say bring on Ohio State. And I know that there are guys in that locker room that would like another shot at them. They were hoping to get it in the Fiesta Bowl. So we'll see what happens. But I think that either way, it's going to be super interesting. And if Michigan finds a way to win this game Saturday and then close it out, it's going to be pretty hard to top that in terms of most satisfying, football seasons that you could possibly have, regardless of who the opponent would be.
I agree with you, Anthony. If I'm a Michigan fan, I'm over there on the Wolverine talking about it on the boards and celebrating the fact that if we play Ohio State again, we'll just beat their ass again. That's the way I would love to look at that if I'm a Michigan fan, because it's been so long since you could be the bully. And Michigan's kind of the bully, at least in that rivalry right now. And it's kind of fun to watch those matchups that are exploited as well in favor of Michigan. That's the other thing, is that I think that you can beat Ohio State. You're not sure you can beat Georgia. So that's another reason that you I would think, lean as a Michigan fan. I don't want to speak for all Michigan fans, but to that matchup again. I know that people say you don't want to play the same team twice or three times. I think if you have a matchup advantage in the trenches, you do. And I think Michigan does. Anthony, best of luck. This is great. I'll end this the way I've ended it all year long, because I actually think we're going to do this again. I'll talk to you down the line. Be well, good sir.
I would love to. Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Take care. That's Anthony Broome, and he works for the Wolverine, and that website is fantastic for all things Michigan. This has been another On3 game preview. We've got more, not many more. It's coming down to the wire here, but as always, you want to check out the On3 sites across the vast network where these writers do outstanding work and get you informed for the biggest of games throughout the season, and that includes the college football playoff. Until next time, I'm Jeff Cameron. Always want to thank our friend, Director Matthew, as I affectionately call him. You guys be well.